There's a good chance you have or you will fall victim to a scam involving identity theft or money. Scammers go after everyone, but seniors are prime targets. Stick around to hear from two experts who can help you avoid and get out of scams. Hello, and welcome to Aging Wisely, a program that explores ways to help seniors be safe and independent. I'm BB Rentella, and today we're talking about a problem that you and every senior faces: scams, fraud, and identity theft. These scams can include emails offering huge prizes, dishonest contractors coming to your door, and robocalls. Even phone calls from people pretending to be the police, the IRS, or your bank. Let's learn more by first meeting a few people who almost fell victim to a scam.
I can't believe it happened to me. I am the most cynical person in the world when I hear about these things.
Even savvy seniors like Patricia are in for a shock. She discovered just how sophisticated scams are today.
The day that this incident occurred, I was in a hurry, and I was trying to contact Comcast about discontinuing a digital box. So I got on the computer and looked it up on Google, which is what I do occasionally, and I'm trying to find a phone number.
Sven Nelson with the Pierce County Prosecutor's Office says telephone scams target seniors because they almost always answer their phones. And in cases like Patricia, her scam started on the internet.
Some of them shy away from the internet, but the ones that are on it, they are easily also confused by spoofed websites and so forth, which looks like a legitimate thing.
A customer service rep answered, and he seemed to know my name. He said, "Well, are you aware that there are people in Mexico and Russia that are also listed on your account? And they have access to your Social Security number, and they are using it to open up other accounts." I kind of went into panic mode, and I said, "How is this possible?"
Just because a scammer calls you and tells you that your number's in jeopardy, that's often them fishing for that information. Well, let me verify your Social Security number. Can you give it to me?
And he said, "Well, you'll have to get a money order for $500. At this point, Lauren had come into the kitchen while I was talking on the phone and said, "You need to get off the phone, this is a scam." So I was immensely relieved to find out that none of this was true, and also relieved because I hadn't actually mailed the $500.
Nelson says your Social Security number should be kept secret. Don't carry your card in your wallet, and don't give it out to anyone.
Once the scammers get a hold of that Social Security number, they can open up bank accounts, loans, they can do all kinds of things and that the victim never even knows about until some credit report comes or bills start coming in the mail. They can also file people's tax returns for them and collect that before the senior does.
In a different example, Nick Gole was looking for an apartment on Craigslist and soon discovered the ad he liked was a scam.
I was led to believe I was going to share an apartment with another person. They wanted $1,000 for a deposit, and then they didn't even want to give me a key to the apartment. And further investigation, we discovered that the apartment really did not exist.
Don't delay. Once you've figured out something is wrong, take the steps that day.
I felt that this must be something that is happening to a lot of senior citizens who are being taken advantage of because we have low income and because we're old, and because we're old, people think that we're stupid.
There's a lot of embarrassment that happens when you're scammed, and nobody wants to admit that to the family. Some family members think, well, what's wrong with mom or dad? Why are they not thinking clearly at this point? And so that just makes it worse, and so they hide it. And then the scammers keep scamming, because once they have a little bit of taste of the money coming in, they're going to keep at it.
Greg McClellan for Aging Wisely.
And welcome back. You don't need to be fearful of scams, but learning more about them and how the scammers trick you can help you say no and hang up before it's too late. Joining us now in the studio is Matt Santelli with Pierce County Aging and Disability Resources and Elizabeth Schiffer-Decker with Tacoma Police Department. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Okay. First and foremost, what is the most common scams?
Right now what we're seeing a lot of is the scams that come across the telephone. Seniors and disabled people too are contacted And usually it's under the guise of it being an authority of some kind. Typically, they're claiming they're from the Internal Revenue Service or Social Security or Medicare. And they typically tell the senior there's some sort of problem going on with their account or with their medical situation that needs to be resolved immediately. Sometimes these are automated calls that come in and the senior's expected to press 1 to talk to a live person. Sometimes it is a live person talking to them, telling them that there's some sort of problem that needs to be resolved. The other ones that are still very common are the sweepstakes scams. Those are the ones that come through the U.S. mail. And in all the time I've worked at the county, I've never actually heard that anyone's ever won these sweepstakes. Normally they're designed to sweeten the deal by saying the person's already won, but then there's typically a claiming fee that needs to be sent in, and then once the person starts responding, the scam continues to propagate. So I don't get those sweepstakes offers in my mailbox, but I see seniors who have stacks and stacks of them because they've been responding over the years. And then there's still the ones that come across the computer, whether it's an email that claims to be from a local bank or a local credit card company, where again the situation is portrayed as being that there needs to be an updated account membership put on the screen, or they need to add additional information about their account. In all cases, they're typically designed to either get money from the senior or get enough personal information that their financial accounts can be hacked, or they're trying to pull the senior into some sort of scenario where they believe they're involved in something that needs to be remedied quickly. And so that's why so many seniors get frightened by these phone calls. They'll go to Western Unions and start sending money, or they'll withdraw money from their bank account, or they'll start giving up personal information because they're convinced that the person on the other end of the line is there to help them, when actually they're there to deprive them of their money in most cases.
Wow. Do you think the seniors, why are they being targeted?
I always look at it in 3 ways. First of all, there are targets of opportunity. And by that I mean the crooks know that seniors typically have some predictable source of income, whether it's Social Security or an annuity or a pension amount that's coming in regularly every month. And they kind of feed off of that, and knowing that even if we don't get the senior this month, we know that next month we can get them because there's money coming in. There's also the availability issue. Seniors are typically not fully in the workforce anymore, which means they are at home, they answer their phones, they answer their front doors, they're available to respond to the pitch that the scammers are sending their way. They also are very conscientious about looking through their mail, they're conscientious about responding to email, so that availability often makes them targets as well. And finally, it's the response. You know, I've found seniors in their generation to be very courteous, respectful, and friendly people. And so if they're told there's something going on, they want to take care of it. If someone is courteous and friendly in how they approach them, they'll generally be trying to help that person. And so that's why so many of the seniors fall into these traps, because the opportunity is there as far as the crooks and scammers are concerned. They're available to be scammed, and they're willing to respond to whatever pitch the scammer has available to send their way.
Elizabeth, so how do I know if something is a scam or not?
There's definitely some red flags. One of the most common scams that we see, again, is over the phone when they're contacting these senior citizens. But one of the questions that should be asked, you know, is this a legitimate situation? And adding on to what Matt said earlier about the scammers being friendly, they're also taking a very threatening approach. And so they're threatening these senior citizens, well, you owe a tax bill, or you had a purchase made in your name and you have to make this payment right now, where they're escalating and getting more threatening. And one of the things that unfortunately the senior citizens aren't doing is slowing down and thinking this through. And you know, if they sat down for a minute and thought, okay, well, I did pay my taxes last year, something's not right with this, or I respond to jury duty. I responded to jury duty last year, or I didn't get my jury duty notice. But one of the things that the seniors are doing is, because they're feeling so threatened, they're responding immediately. So if they just take the time to stop and think, okay, think this through for a minute. Does this sound legitimate? But a lot of these scammers, they've been doing this for years and years, and they are very good at what they do, and they're very convincing to the senior citizens especially. And so they get caught up in the seniors get caught up in the moment, and they're not thinking it through. But if they were just to slow down, think things through, think, okay, wait a minute, I did pay my taxes, or I did show up for jury duty, or I don't have a grandson in jail. They're going to be able to realize that it's a scam. Some of these in the mail, as I've pointed out, I've seen countless letters, and a lot of the things come from overseas. And so I sat down with one of the senior citizens who was being scammed one time, and I said, let's just take a look at this letter. Look at the spelling and grammatical errors in this letter. Someone from the IRS is not going to mail you a letter that has all these spelling and grammatical errors. But again, just taking the time to sit down, think things through, and think, that probably is a scam. But again, unfortunately, the ones that are scammed, they're so caught up in the moment, they're either afraid, or these scammers, again, are so good that the seniors aren't taking the time to think things through.
Are there any other ways that scammers approach victims?
I have seen some unbelievably aggressive approaches over the years. One gal, unfortunately, had given away about $500,000 to these scammers. It was just absolutely heartbreaking. But when she wouldn't answer the phone, they would send taxis to her house. They would send plumbers to her house. They told her one of these sweepstakes scams that she had won a Mercedes, and they actually sent a taxi to take her to the Mercedes dealership to test drive the Mercedes. But the flip side is you have to send us $5,000 for your taxes, for your winnings, or you have to send us $10,000 because you have to pay the taxes up front. All these different things that she kept falling for over and over and over. But if she didn't answer the phone, their tactics became more aggressive. They contacted her family members. They actually contacted the police several times and had them go out to her house. That was an extreme case, but again, and she was being targeted through the mail, phone numbers. Anytime she changed her phone number, they would get her new phone number. I don't know how they were doing that, but they're very, very aggressive in all forms of contact.
With the government and any businesses, agencies, do they ever call to confirm any account information over the phone?
They should not be doing that, no, and that's one of the big red flags, is that if they are calling and claiming to be from Medicare, the IRS, or the Tacoma Police Department, whatever the case might be, that's not a legitimate phone call. That's a red flag to say that there's something wrong there, because again, they're using that sheen of authority to try to convince the senior that something needs to be done, that a problem's been identified, and they can up the ante by becoming more threatening and aggressive by saying, well, we'll put you in jail if you don't resolve this problem right away. Sometimes they'll call and say, we need to keep this quiet, don't tell anyone. And so that prevents the seniors from involving other people who might be willing to kind of say, this is something wrong here, this isn't a real deal. And so by that kind of cover of secrecy, they keep the scam going as well. So no, that's one of the big things we like to tell the seniors. No government entity is calling you to try to verify information, to have you share personal information. The first approach in those cases is always going to be a U.S. mail letter that says there's a problem here, and then you'll be able to verify that with the appropriate contact phone numbers and locations if you need to.
So speaking of that, most phones have caller IDs. Why doesn't that prevent scammers?
Well, years ago there was much fanfare when the do not call list was developed, and the hope was if people registered their phone number that they wouldn't be hit by scams and telemarketing schemes and things like that. Unfortunately, the do not call list was only as good as the people willing to follow the law. The scammers are outside the law anyway, so they think nothing of calling through and trying these phone approaches to scams and fraud. Unfortunately, with the caller ID, what we're finding is it's not as trustworthy as an identifier as we had hoped it would be over time. Years ago, we could look at that caller ID and say, oh, it's a friend, or it's US Bank, or it's Target calling me. Now they can do what's known as spoofing, where they can identify themselves as being a legitimate entity, and instead they're actually a scam call. So oftentimes I'll see calls on my home phone that say U.S. government or U.S. Treasury or Washington, D.C., so it's looking like a legitimate call from that area code when in fact it's a scam call or a fraud call. And they're even now spoofing local 253 numbers in our area code here or 360 to put people's guard down, to think, oh, this must be a friend or a neighbor calling. So you do end up picking up the line when it's actually a scam call coming through.
So let's just say I'm being scammed now. What should I do?
One of the first things you want to do, and unfortunately, and I see this especially with the senior citizens, is they're very embarrassed and they don't want to tell anybody. And that's the wrong approach, unfortunately, because there are some measures that we can take to help them. And so one of the first things, talk to a trusted family member, let them know what's going on. And then you want to file a police report. Now with that, we can't, as a police department, not necessarily, we may not be able to help you. A lot of times these scammers are overseas, the money is immediately gone, but by filing a police report, at least that's documented. You're going to want to work with your banks, your financial institutions, monitor your credit report, especially if you've received that phone call where you've provided the information, either your banking account information or your social security number. There's going to be, you're going to need to take some additional steps to protect your identity in the future. But by filing the police report, the officer can walk the person through, depending on the type of scam, depending on the compromise, walk them through some steps, what you need to do, and then possibly staying on top of your credit reports through a variety of different ways to make sure that there's not additional compromises on your credit. And again, by not answering the phone, as I've seen, and I've been in the house with a senior citizen when her phone literally rang non-stop. And it's hard for her, and it's such harassment and such abuse. And I would answer the phone and tell them who I was, and they don't care because they know they're out of the country, we can't touch them. But shutting the phone off, ignoring the phone, getting a new phone, and only giving that phone number to family members, and just trying your best to ignore those phone calls, because they are relentless, but that's really the only way to get them to stop, is by completely ignoring them.
And what are some other tips that you can give to prevent getting scammed?
One of the things, and again, we're a different generation, not as courteous as the older generation. The older generation is going to answer their phones. I don't answer my phone if I don't recognize the phone number, even if it's a 253-798, which is a county phone number. I won't answer it. If it's important and if it's a legitimate phone call, they're going to leave me a message and I'm going to be able to call them back. But my phone rings probably like everybody else's 2 or 3 times a day with what I would imagine would be scamming type of phone calls. So ignoring those phone calls, start questioning. If you do answer the phone and somebody is saying they're from the Internal Revenue Service or the Pierce County Sheriff's Department, and you've got a warrant and we're going to come and get you because you missed jury duty, question them. Don't believe everything that they say. Hang up, try to verify some information, and call a legitimate number back to verify that information. That's one of the best ways. Don't answer these letters that you get in the mail. For example, these lottery winners. Again, I've never seen anybody that has actually won the sweepstakes or these lotteries that they're getting in the mail. Nobody's ever gotten money from an African prince that, you send me $5,000 and I'll send you $5 million. It's just not realistic. So taking that time, slowing down, thinking things through, talking about it with somebody, because once you start saying the words out loud, I've always seen when you say the scenario out loud, you even realize yourself that it's a scam. And so that's really just, there's several steps that seniors can take especially, but just being more cautious of the phone calls and the letters.
And so how will I know if someone has my information?
Typically what we'll see is that if they are monitoring their credit score might be impacted. They may get collection notices for accounts they didn't even know they had open. They might start getting collection phone calls. They might start getting mailings about credit cards and other retail cards that they didn't know they had even applied for. So one thing I always tell folks in terms of the prevention and being able to recognize something's gone wrong is to know right now what accounts you do have open. I always tell my seniors, you need to know what accounts you have open at which retailers and which credit card companies, which banks you're using. You need to know what's the contents of your purse and wallet in case they get stolen. That way a scammer can't call and say they're going to take care of it. You know the numbers to call that you can call to verify. I know once we got a call from the Long Beach Police Department after we had traveled there to visit some friends, and they told us that a local hotel where we had stayed, the accounts had been compromised. And so they warned us to say, okay, the scammers may now call you and say, well, they've found out what's going on, they're going to take care of it for you. So we had a list of all of our accounts and were able to call and put fraud alerts on those accounts. So that's kind of a method of prevention before you actually have the identity theft happen. So that's why we always encourage people to very closely monitor the accounts they have. Take a look at those invoices you get every month. Is there a small amount being billed out to your credit card or your debit card that you don't recognize? That's usually a pattern the scammers will use if they have your information, where they're testing to see if they can get some small amounts through that you won't notice, and then they'll hit you with a bigger amount later. And then sometimes you'll get calls that are unsolicited that will say, well, your Bank of America account was compromised. My parents got this call. They don't have a Bank of America account. But again, it was just a matter of trying to scare them into talking to someone about their personal information. So it's wise to know what accounts you have open. It's wise to ask for a credit report. We have the information where you can get a free secure credit report so you know what accounts are there. It's not unusual. You'll get your credit report and find out there's accounts that you've had dormant for years, out of state even if you went to college in another state. It's good to have that information and start closing those old accounts, because the more you have open, the more likely they might be able to hack into those accounts.
And if I can just add on to that, one of the issues that we see from a law enforcement standpoint is once somebody is the actual victim of identity theft, meaning somebody has compromised their identity, used their social security number to open up accounts, it's an ongoing problem. Once the information is out there, and we've all been victims of these big computer glitches or account takeovers, all the businesses that had their data breaches. We've all been the victim of that. All of our information is out there, unfortunately. But once somebody is the victim of identity theft, where they've compromised their identity with their social security number, varying accounts, that information continues to stay out there. And so people, regardless of their age, really need to stay on top of their credit reports. And so they can get a copy of their credit reports. And if somebody is savvy, you can get three free credit reports a year. Or if it's an extreme case, certainly you can hire a credit monitoring service. There's varying businesses out there. You see commercials for them all the time. But for that peace of mind, especially if you've already been the victim of identity theft, you can hire one of these companies to kind of stay on top of things. You can put a freeze on your credit if you're the victim of identity theft. And one of the benefits of that, especially as senior citizens who aren't out buying new cars and boats and houses and opening up new credit cards, you can put a freeze on your credit so that no one will be able to open accounts in your name. But again, one of these credit monitoring services will also alert you if you have been the victim. But unfortunately, once your information is out there, a lot of times you're violated again and again and again. So staying on top of that is very critical.
With the seniors, they're not often good with getting on the computer and using the internet, and some don't have any families. Is there a resource that they can reach out to help them figure out when they are being scammed?
Yeah, we have some good information through our county office about computer security. We also route people to the senior centers that typically have some free computer classes. Most of the senior centers have some level of computer class, as do the community colleges, so people can get more comfortable when they're online. It's been said that if someone brings a personal computer home from the computer store, plugs it into the internet without any kind of firewalls or security on the computer, that it'll be completely corrupted within about 24 hours, meaning that there'll be spyware on there that's watching what you're doing. There'll be malware on there that's tracking your keystrokes. There'll be viruses on there that are monitoring your email and all kinds of different activities. So it's really kind of the Wild West when it comes to plugging in your computer to the internet, and people don't realize. They'll tell me things like, well, I turned my computer off and I thought that would take care of it. Well, the pipeline to the internet is constantly open and sending information back and forth. So there's really very significant threats there, and we've seen seniors that have fallen prey to the phony website, email link scams, to the royalty from overseas scams. We've had seniors that have fallen prey to these overseas romance scams where someone claims that they're their boyfriend, girlfriend, fiance, and they just keep sending money overseas, and eventually this person supposedly will come and marry them. And those ones are getting more and more common for both men and women, unfortunately. So there's a lot of security you can get on your computer and a lot of training about what to look out for, and we're happy to give them that information if they give us a call.
What is the best advice you can give?
Right now, I would say, as I always say to the groups that I speak to, is that prevention is a lot easier than recovery. And prevention meaning at your personal level, protecting your personal information. Certainly there are hacks we read about in the newspaper all the time about the Equifax was hacked and various government entities get hacked. And so, yes, there are situations where you're the personal information you're trying to protect is out of your control and it's beyond what we're capable of managing. But at the personal level, where a lot of the scams we're talking about are occurring, it's just being wise about not sharing personal information on the phone, not responding to phony sweepstakes offers, being very careful with who you're corresponding with on email, being careful even at your front door who's coming to your door under the pretense of being a repair person or an inspector, or in public places being careful about who's approaching you as well. Just common sense, safety, realizing there's the old adage about there's nothing for free, you don't get something for nothing. All those are still true. And we live in a very developed area here in the Puget Sound region. There's nothing that can be offered to you or promised to you that you couldn't verify locally. So we always tell people, when in doubt, go to the local entity or call the county office, call the police department to get verification. And 99% of the time they're going to say, we've heard about that scam already, don't fall prey to it.
Yeah. I would, and just if something doesn't seem right, it probably isn't. All of your instincts are going to be correct if you are contacted and it just doesn't seem right. Again, taking a second. One of the common threats that they make is, well, don't tell anybody, don't tell anybody, don't tell anybody. Well, because they know, the scammers know that once you tell somebody, they're going to say, oh, that is a scam for sure.
Right.
So that's a big red flag right there. If you're ever threatened with not telling anybody, if you're ever threatened with jail, I promise you the police department is not going to come and get you if you miss jury duty. That's one of the biggest things. Another one is if there's gift cards involved, it's going to be a scam. No legitimate government entity or even business is going to want payment in iTunes gift cards. And so some of those things that just jump out as red flags, if people are just more aware and if something doesn't sound right, take that minute to verify that information, and chances are it's going to be a scam and you've headed it off at the beginning rather than trying to recover.
Well, thank you for sharing this great information with us. And remember, don't be afraid to say no and hang up. We're going to leave you now with a list of resources related to scams and frauds. Thank you for watching, and be safe.